This was a German punishment for deserters. My foot was chained. The other end of the shackle was nailed into a rock. My teammates left me with only a few bullets and a little food, and my job was to stop the Soviet soldiers. After that, everyone else left, leaving me alone here. I watched them with my sniper rifle, but they had already hidden in the thick forest. Now I needed to get rid of the shackle immediately, in despair. I raised my sniper rifle and pulled the trigger. A wave of pain shot through my entire body. I couldn't help but scream. But the chain was too thick, I couldn't break it. So I searched through my backpack and finally found a pair of glasses. Then I came up with an idea. I carefully removed the lenses, then snapped a pine twig in half, scraped off the resin with my knife, put it in my mouth to soften it, then stuck it onto the edge of the lens. Next I inserted another twig and poured some water into the gap. I used this method to make a simple magnifying glass. Then I placed dry moss on the metal spike and used the lens to focus sunlight. Soon the moss caught fire. I quickly gathered dry branches, making the fire burn hotter. Once the branches burned out, I poured cold water on the rock. The sudden temperature change cracked the stone. I tried to pull out the nail, but it still wouldn't move. I didn't give up. I repeated the process again. The hole in the rock grew larger. After a few more tries, I was finally able to pull the nail out. Around noon, I was sitting by the rock eating canned food, when I suddenly heard an engine in the distance. I picked up my sniper rifle to check. I saw a Soviet vehicle passing by. Luckily, they didn't see me, but I knew I had to act fast. The bad news was my branches were almost gone. If I didn't escape soon, I might freeze to death in this brutal winter, even if the Soviets never found me. My food was almost gone, and I only had one last cup of water. This was my final chance. I took out all my bullets, poured the gunpowder into a metal can, then poured it into the hole in the rock, covered it with a stone, and threw it into the burning moss. The exploding gunpowder released white smoke. I quickly got up to check, but the nail still hadn't moved. Frustration and anger overwhelmed me. I grabbed a stone and slammed it against the nail. From morning until night, until my final attempt, the nail finally started to loosen. I made one last push and finally pulled the nail out. I was free. I paid a high price for a body that was already completely dead and sent it to a private hospital for resuscitation. I begged the doctors to save my father no matter the cost. I was willing to pay anything. The doctors didn't ask about the patient's condition. They just rolled the body into the operating room. But as soon as they began checking, they realized the person was already dead. Yet the doctors insisted on operating on a dead body because they understood the psychology of the deceased's family so well. They thought I was a very filial child. They believed I would spare no expense to save my father's life. So this was the perfect opportunity for them to drain my money. A group of doctors began pretending to be busy, with people constantly coming in and out of the operating room. Then the chief surgeon came to me and handed me a list. He said my father was in a critical condition and that I needed to hurry and buy medicine, and I had to get it from the pharmacy next door to the hospital because many of the prescribed medicines were only sold there. I saw that the list had dozens of medicines, and although I didn't know the specific uses for each one, I still went to the pharmacy and bought a lot of them. The total cost of the medicines drained half of my salary for the year. I handed the 2 bags to the nurse and asked her what the medicines were for. But to my surprise, the nurse gave me a cold attitude and impatiently said that my father's condition was complicated, and even if she explained it to me, I wouldn't understand. She then turned around and returned the medicines to the pharmacy unchanged and scolded the sales clerk for not taking the chance to sell me more expensive medicine earlier. At that moment, the doctor came out and told me I needed to pay an additional $500,000 for the surgery to continue, but I said I had already paid for the surgery when I arrived. The doctor said that because my father was in critical condition, they needed to invite a famous medical expert for the surgery, and the expert would require an additional payment. After I paid another large sum of money, a serious-faced expert entered the operating room, and we anxiously waited outside the operating room. But inside, it was calm and peaceful. All the doctors and nurses gathered together chatting. Every half hour or so, one of them would come out, shifting from happy to serious in a second. Each doctor acted more like an experienced actor. They continued to trick me into paying more fees, and by the time I had handed over all my savings, the doctor finally came out with a heavy expression and apologized, saying they had tried their best, but my father could not be saved and had passed away. I kept begging the doctor to try again, but the doctor said it was impossible to save a dead person. At that moment, I suddenly became calm instead of anxious, and asked them, "Isn't it your job to treat the dead?" Then I pulled out the death certificate for the body and told the doctors that the body wasn't my father at all, but one I bought from the crematorium. This body had actually been dead for several days. I asked them what they had been doing for more than 8 hours in there, and if their goal was to get my money from my bank card. Their actions were nothing but fraud. That day, my son just waved at the window and was shot dead by 2 white police officers. They searched the car afterward, but didn't find any weapons. All that was inside was his driver's license and a college acceptance letter he had just received. The two officers immediately panicked, but they didn't think about admitting their mistake. Instead, like always, they handcuffed my son and planted an unregistered handgun next to him. They made it look like my son had attacked an officer, and they had stopped him. You could tell by their smooth actions that this wasn't the first time they had done something like this. It wasn't until later that I got the news of my son's death. When I saw James lying in bed, I completely broke down. I ran into the bathroom and cried uncontrollably. The next morning, we received a report from the police stating that James had been shot on the spot for refusing to surrender while armed. But I didn't believe their investigation for a second. I knew my son too well. He would never do something like that. So I went to find those two police officers, hoping they would apologize to James.
You can't even bring yourself to apologize.
I don't apologize for doing my job.
You don't realize that kid you killed, he has a father with resources, a father who's gonna use every single resource he has to make sure you never forget the day you pulled that trigger.
Like I said, I don't apologize for doing my job.
My wife finally couldn't take it anymore and slapped him across the face. But the white officer just smiled condescendingly. The next day, I managed to contact the mayor and arranged a private meeting. But when I got there, it turned into an official discussion. Even so, I still hoped he would take James's case seriously.
I'll speak plainly. As an institution, we have to trust our officers unless we find evidence to the contrary. You've seen the defense lawyers attack them in court. If we lose that deference, then every slick lawyer in the country will be walking shysters down the street.
He also promised to get me the highest possible compensation within his power, but on the condition that I would never bring up the case again. I flat out rejected his offer. Back home, I reached out to an officer I had helped in the past, hoping he could help me find some clues, so he used his position to sneak into the archives. Sure enough, he found something. The records showed that 3 years ago, the same two officers had killed a boy for refusing to surrender while armed, and the gun found at the scene was exactly the same as the one next to James. So I went to the address in the email and found the boy's family from that case. But the boy's father thought I was there to cause trouble.
Hey, fellas, is there a problem?
I quickly pulled out James's photo and explained what had happened, asking him to join me in suing the city government.
Okay, check it. House coming up, we live by code. You take mine, I take yours. You never snitch on your homies. Police, play by the same rules. You shoot a cop, you're lucky to make it out alive. So you say you're a judge, right?
Yes, sir.
How many times you see a regular cop with a complaint against a cop? How many times the cop snitch on another cop? They're still around to tell.
Hearing that I had no choice but to give up on that idea. But the next day I saw the news. The city government described James as an armed fugitive, saying he had violently resisted arrest on the street. That news completely enraged me. I went to see the mayor with the two case files, but when the mayor saw the evidence, he turned hostile. He said the evidence didn't prove James's innocence.
This is the best we got. The city tried. We offered you money, something as a token. You said no.
His words were like a sharp knife stabbing into my heart. The law I had always trusted couldn't protect my black skin. Finally, after seeing the truth, I decided to take my own revenge.